The dust settled around the old homestead as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of crimson and gold. Jake Morrison had ridden out from town that morning with nothing but a letter in his pocket and a heavy weight in his chest. The letter was from the territorial government, stamped and official, informing the woman who lived in the small adobe house at the edge of his property that her time was up. They wanted her gone, relocated to the reservation up north where the rest of her people had been forced to go. But Jake knew better than most that this woman Maria wasn't just another Apache to be shuffled around like cattle. She had history here, roots that ran deeper than his own family's claim to this land. Her husband, a peaceful man named Chaska, had worked these fields alongside Jake's father for nearly a decade before the fever took him 3 years ago. They had built something together, a fragile bridge between two worlds that seemed determined to remain at war. As Jake approached the small house, he could see her in the garden, tending to the vegetables that somehow managed to grow in this unforgiving soil. She wore a simple dress, brown and practical, with a fringed leather vest that had belonged to her grandmother. Around her neck hung a turquoise necklace, the only piece of jewelry she owned, a gift from Chaska on their wedding day. Her dark hair caught the afternoon light as she straightened up, sensing his presence before he'd even dismounted. "Rancher Morrison," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet space between them. She didn't call him Jake, never had, even though they'd known each other for years. There was always that distance, that careful respect that masked something deeper and more complicated. Jake removed his hat, holding it in his hands as he walked toward her. "Maria, I need to talk to you." She wiped her hands on her apron, her dark eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She had always been able to read him too easily, to see through the polite words to the truth beneath. "You have that look," she said softly. "The look men get when they come to take something away." He felt the accusation in her words, even though her tone remained neutral. "It's not like that. I'm not here to." "Then why are you here?" She crossed her arms, not defensively, but as if holding herself together. "The soldiers came last week. They said I have 30 days. The banker came 3 days ago. He said the land deed isn't valid because my husband wasn't a citizen. The preacher came yesterday. He said I should go peacefully, that it's God's will." She paused, her gaze never leaving his face. "So tell me, Rancher Morrison, do you want something from me too?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with years of accumulated grief and resignation. Jake had rehearsed what he would say on the ride over, had practiced the careful words that would make this easier somehow. But standing here, looking at this woman who had already lost so much, all those prepared speeches seemed hollow and cruel. "I came to offer you a way to stay," he said finally. Something flickered in her eyes. Hope, suspicion, or perhaps just weariness. "And what would this way cost me?" Jake pulled the letter from his pocket, along with another document he'd had drawn up in town. "The law says you can't own this land as an Apache widow. But there's a provision. If you were married to a citizen, to someone with legal standing, the claim would be valid." Maria's expression didn't change, but he saw her fingers tighten slightly on her arms. "You're asking me to marry you." "I'm offering you a choice," he corrected, though the distinction felt thin even to him. "It would be a legal arrangement, nothing more. You could keep your house, your garden, your life here. I wouldn't interfere." "Out of kindness?" The question carried a sharp edge. "Or out of guilt?" Jake flinched because she'd struck closer to the truth than he wanted to admit. "Maybe both. Your husband was a good man. He deserved better than to die from a white man's disease, and you deserve better than to be driven from your home because of laws made by people who never knew him, never knew you." "But you know me," she said quietly, stepping closer. "You've watched me for 3 years, Rancher Morrison. You've ridden past my house, checked on my fences, left supplies on my doorstep that you thought I wouldn't notice. You've carried your guilt like a stone, as if you personally killed every Apache who died in the wars, as if you personally wrote every law that takes our land." He wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. She was right. He had watched her, had worried about her, had felt the weight of his people's sins every time he saw her working alone in that garden, keeping alive a small piece of life in a world that seemed determined to erase her existence. My husband used to talk about you, Maria continued, her voice softening slightly. He said you were different from the others, that you saw people instead of just Indians or whites. He trusted you. That's why I haven't run, why I've stayed here even when everyone else was driven north. Because he believed this land could be different, that people like you could make it different. I'm trying, Jake said, and the admission felt like exposing a wound. That's what this is. I'm trying to find a way to make it right. Maria looked away, toward the mountains in the distance where her people had once roamed freely. You can't make it right. What's done is done. What's taken can't be given back. But maybe. She trailed off, and when she looked back at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Maybe we can make something new. Something that honors what was lost by refusing to lose anything more. Is that a yes? Jake asked, hardly daring to hope. It's a question, she replied. If I agree to this marriage of paper and law, if I take your name and your protection, what do you want from me? Because everyone wants something. Rancher Morrison. The soldiers want my land for their forts. The settlers want it for their farms. The government wants me gone so they can forget we ever existed. What do you want? Jake thought about lying, about claiming he wanted nothing, that this was purely altruistic. But Maria deserved more than polite lies. She deserved the truth, even if it was complicated and uncomfortable. I want to stop feeling like a coward, he said quietly. I want to believe that one person can make a difference, that one act of decency can push back against all the cruelty and injustice. I want to look at this land and see the future your husband believed in, not the past that haunts us both. And maybe. He hesitated, then continued. Maybe I want to stop being alone too. Not in the way you might think, but in the way that matters. Alone with this guilt, alone with this anger at what my people have done, alone with the knowledge that staying silent makes me complicit. Maria studied him for a long moment, and Jake felt as though he were being weighed, measured against some invisible standard that only she could see. Finally, she nodded slowly. I'll marry you, Rancher Morrison. But not out of gratitude, and not because I have no other choice. I'll marry you because my husband believed in bridges, believed that two different worlds could exist side by side without one destroying the other. Maybe he was a fool, maybe we're both fools, but I'd rather be a fool with hope than a wise woman with nothing. She reached up and touched the turquoise necklace at her throat. I'll never take this off. I'll never forget Chaska or pretend that this arrangement is something it's not. But I'll honor it, and I'll honor you for offering it. I wouldn't ask you to forget, Jake said. And I wouldn't want you to pretend. Whatever this is, let it be honest. Maria extended her hand, and Jake took it, sealing their agreement with a handshake that felt both solemn and revolutionary. Two people from different worlds, brought together not by love but by necessity and a stubborn refusal to accept the way things were supposed to be. As the sun continued its descent, casting long shadows across the desert, Maria asked one more question, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think we can make this work? Not just the legal arrangement, but the impossible thing we're really trying to do, living as equals in a world that doesn't believe we should. Jake looked at her, at the strength in her eyes and the sorrow she carried with such dignity, and gave her the only answer he had. I don't know, but I think we have to try.